The chiptunes from the Square Waves to the Stage panel. Thank you so much for coming out, guys. I'm going to play something to get us started because I'm just going to go like, chiptunes! Good. So I'm just going to talk to you guys, and hopefully things work out, and hopefully you'll learn something. The main point of this panel, the reason why I put it together, is the chiptune scene has this incredible depth to it. The more I learned about it, whether it was through the culture of it, or the technical nature of how it's made, or the philosophy of like why they do it, like it just served to enhance how I felt about it, and I kind of just want to try to share some of these things with you guys, so you guys can kind of, appreciate this awesome kind of music as much as I have. I just found the more I learned about it, the more I enjoyed it. So hopefully I can let you guys in on some of the stuff that's a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to start off really, really basic. I'm Daniel Cannon, and I'm that guy. I'm a wizard. I play music primarily with the Game Boy, so you'll kind of see me talk more so about Game Boy stuff, but the other kinds of chiptune are actually just as awesome. So I don't want you guys to think that's the only thing out there. And also I play guitar, and some of you guys might know me from Metroid Metal, I don't know. But I'm here today to talk about chiptunes. And my friend abducted by sharks, he actually makes music not with a Game Boy. What do you make music with?
I write music with Ableton and Ableton accessories.
So that's considered fake music, by the way. Yeah, doesn't that sound like a slur? It's not really, though. So I'm just going to talk really quickly about chiptunes. So chiptunes, or it's also known as chip music, it's a synthesized electronic music. It's usually produced with the sound chips of old video game consoles or vintage computers, and a lot of times we make it by emulation or software synthesizers or soft synths. Are any of you guys musicians yourself? All right. So how many just appreciators of music do we have out there? Okay, that's only a good, healthy mix. All right.
How many of you hate music?
That guy's an asshole. Get out of here. Usually chip music is kind of like made with basic waveforms, like your square wave, a sine wave, saw wave, but it can actually include some really complex stuff like FM synthesis and like rudimentary samples and things like that. And it's usually this sort of lo-fi, almost like original gangster electronic music sort of sound, but it's actually got a pretty diverse palette of stuff going on. And I actually have written at the bottom, Mario at a rave, and that's actually a reference to something that you might find in the media, because oftentimes the media likes to write articles about chiptune because it's interesting and it's awesome. But it turns out that chiptune is like this really complex topic that a regular journalist who's not super into the scene, when they try to write about it, they usually have glaring errors, not necessarily to their own fault, because it's kind of hard to figure out if you don't know what's going on. So that's something that has been said before, Mario at a rave, and I'm sorry, journalists, but I will try to explain some of the stuff, so if you try to write an article, it's a little bit more factually correct. Yeah, I love journalists. So just a little bit of history. Chiptunes started with old video games, obviously. In fact, our little friend at the bottom, the first game that actually had music was Space Invaders. And let me play for you the first video game song. It's awesome. Yeah, that is literally it. But that's where we started with video game music. And I will say that the Space Invaders theme actually got faster, that dun, 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 like as you got progressed. So it was actually kind of immersive in a weird, intensifying way. I don't know. I'm just trying to give some props to Space Invaders. But the first chiptune album, even though it's kind of a recent phenomenon, at least in the last 10 years, it's really kind of taken a life of its own. The first chiptune album was actually made in 1984 by somebody associated with the group which is like this really original gangster electronic group. They sampled a bunch of stuff from old arcade games and actually made the first chiptune record. So it's actually a really old concept, but only nowadays we're really starting to figure out what the fuck we're doing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the demo scene, and the demo scene is this awesome European thing, and it also happens in the States a little bit, but it's closely intertwined to the chiptune scene. So the demo scene were programmers who, like, they kind of wanted to explore the graphical limits of the PCs and old video game consoles, and they would do these crazy graphical things, and they would make their own tools to do that. And the reason that's important is what they would do is try to get the most out of those consoles that could possibly, like, get taken out of them. Like, they would do, like, 3D effects on, like, a Commodore 64. And the way that they did that is they would make their own tools, and they would use a lot of complex illusions to actually create a 3D effect. They wouldn't actually render a 3D room. They would just make it look like there was a 3D effect going on. So we actually use that a lot in chiptunes, where we use a weird musical technique in order to make an illusion to, like, make it sound like there's more going on than we actually can do with the old consoles. So the demo scene also had strong ties to the hacker and whereas scene. So have any of you ever downloaded any illegal software?
No.
That guy. So, you know when you have your keygen that you never opened ever and it has that sweet tune coming out of it? Well, they would also make tools to unlock software because they were just kind of like masturbating their prowess as hackers and programmers. And they actually would have a ton of space left over, so they would, if you can see here, probably not, but they usually have a little graphical thing going on here, and they would also have music playing when you open it, and they literally would just find ways to do things with the space left over in the files. They would just maximize, like, all the space they could, and then it would be like a 5 kilobit file. They could unlock your program, have a graphical thing going on, and music playing all generatively, and they would do it all in like 3 kilobytes or something like that. And that's something that a lot of people, when they hear a chiptune, they'd be like, oh, that's keygen music. So, I don't know. Yes, it has been done before. And so, the philosophy of the demo scene is to take a piece of hardware as far as it can go, and really just pimp your ride with your Commodore 64 or your NES or something like that. And the other idea is to create art within the space. And the thing about that is when you have these really specific limitations, it forces you to make different art than you would if you could do anything. So if I Photoshop, I'm going to make a much different piece of art than I would if I had a Commodore 64 and I'm trying to write my own tools to make something. And, you know, that's good. That's a good thing. It makes a diverse, you know, new kind of art, and it kind of, it's a good thing. It's,
I agree.
So, and the other thing is there's not only art in the final product, but also in the programming, which means, like, some of the complex, awesome things they did with programming, like, it's almost a work of art in how much awesome things they got out of so little. It's almost like making a spaceship out of canoes or something, if that makes sense. And I'm actually going to show you a demo if you've never seen one. How many of you have never seen a demo before? I love how hands were going up like 3 seconds later. Like, maybe that I've seen a demo. So this is one actually for a Game Boy, and it has music along with it. And so imagine if you had seen these graphics when you were playing a Game Boy game, all right? music in that was actually done by a modern chiptune artist. His name is Nordlip. He's from some European country. They're all the same, I think. I'm sorry, Europe. I'm a terrible person. But I don't know if you guys could see, you know, a Game Boy only has not only 4 colors, but only like 4 lightness of colors. Like they only have 1 color and only 4 like different shades of it. And they were still able to get like 3D lighting effects and stuff like that. And again, they weren't actually rendering a 3D landscape. They were just creating illusions with what little they had. And it looks really cool, and it has kind of this character to it that you wouldn't have if I just, you know, opened up modern 3D software and had a light shining around. So it's pretty cool. I'm really into that. I hope you are too. So some of the common chips people are using in chiptunes is the NES, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. I'll show you just a little bit of the NES sound. I'm sure you guys know that one. That's usually, I don't know, you guys into old video game music? Because I used to listen to all kinds of old video game music. I go through all my old Mega Man files, and I just love it. But that has this really characteristic sound, but I tend to make music with the Game Boy, because the Game Boy is like the NES except on steroids. So I'm actually going to play something from the Game Boy, and it's similar, but it has a way heavier sound. So that's the Game Boy sound, and it's kind of like the NES, except it's a little bit heavier. That was actually a track from my record, because I'm a whore. But there's also, you know, plenty of other ways to make music. Some people use the Atari, which is fucking really nasty sounding. I don't know, that sound like any industrial band should totally be like trying to find that, because, I don't know, it sounds really heavy to me, and it's not something you find in music most of these days. But some of the other stuff, people are using Genesis type sounds, which is called FM synthesis. It kind of has a wacky bass sound. I don't really like it that much, because you can't get these huge sounds out of it, but it definitely has a lot of character to it. One thing about the Genesis in particular is the chip in it is actually the same one that's in the Yamaha DX series. The Yamaha DX series was a super popular keyboard during the 80s. In fact, like every 80s hit ever that had a keyboard had the same chip as you find in the Genesis. So technically every 80s keyboard song is a chip. Do not quote me on that. The Commodore 64 is also really popular, but that's a European thing, and I hate Europe. People in the States, for some reason, don't really use it, but it's got this chip called It's got this chip called the SID, and it can actually do a bit more than the NES chip, and I see why people like it. I just don't have a Commodore 64 around, and I've never played one. So the SID station isn't that a right? It's a synth box that people use nowadays, and they usually hook it up like a MIDI controller. Right. No, people like even legitimate musicians who aren't chip musicians. I'm just kidding. They're actually using these sounds, and like the SID chip is appropriated into a product called what is it called? The SID station.
We had like 1,000 of them, and now there's no more.
Oh, well that is, apparently you can't get it anymore. But with the NES, you know, they have this thing called the Power Pack, or MIDI Nest. That's, you know, people created their own tools to actually take advantage One thing is, I love general MIDI stuff, but it's technically not considered chiptune, but I'd say fuck that. Like,
Fuck it.
Yeah, right? I don't know if you guys listen to like Canyon, Dr. Mid, like in Windows 10.1 or something, but I don't know, to me it's in the same spirit of like shitty sounding instruments, and making music with it. So I love MIDI, general MIDI, that is. So the chip sound has this sound, you don't really hear that much outside of it. And the reason for that is there's specific limitations on what it can and cannot do. So the Game Boy and the NES in particular, I'm going to talk about them just because I'm more familiar with them. But the other system has similar limitations. Is you have a limited number of channels to make music with, which means that like each channel can only play one note at a time. It's called monophonic. And if you only have 3 of them, you can only play 3 notes at one time. And so, I don't know, it's like playing guitar and only having 3 fingers or something, or 3 strings. And the other thing you get is white noise. So if I gave you a white noise generator and was like, make something out of that, you'd be like, I don't know, what would you do? I don't know. You would make chiptunes, actually. But these channels, they also can only make a few different timbres at a time, only a few different sounds. But the thing is they do have a superpower, is they can totally cycle through these notes and also those limited number of timbres really, really fast. And so we exploit the shit out of that in order to get lots of interesting sounds. So I'll actually just show you really quick because audio is way better than just telling you about it. So if I make a noise, so I have that sound I can make this sound, then I can make that sound. And it's like, how do I make music out of those 3 sounds? And the trick is I alter between them very quickly oftentimes. So this first note here, I'm going to cycle through a lot of notes. This number 3 up here, I'm using a 50% duty cycle, which is that kind of rounder sounding one. And then this one, oh wait, maybe I don't hear. Oh yeah, so this one, it uses a slightly smaller waveform. I don't know if you can see what I'm highlighting right here. And then this one uses a 75%, and so I'm cycling through them very fast to get a certain sound. The other thing I'm going to do right here after I play it is you'll see that it's a lot of notes at once, and what I'm doing is, since I can't play a chord because I can only play 3 notes at a time, what I'll do is I'll cycle through a ton of notes really fast, and I'll give the illusion of a chord. And this is called like the arpeggio. It's something that's very big in chip music. And so I will show you what that sounds like. And what that does is it lets me use one channel to make a full chord sound. And in fact, the other cool thing is I can do these crazy complex chords that I would never be able to play on a guitar. Like, I think there's a 7th, 5th, 2nd, and something else in there. It's just a really complex chord that expands across like multiple octaves. If I tried to play that, if I gave that to a keyboard player, he might yell at me. So what we do is we exploit the huge precision that we have with this instrument in order to create a lot of things. So moving back on. So, like I was saying, a lot of the iconic chip sounds that we have are essentially creative workarounds to the problems of like, oh, I can only play one note at once. Well, I'll just play a lot of notes really fast on one channel, and I'll create an illusion of something. And what's cool is that sound, that bleep. Like, if you think about the word bleep, like I can almost put like 3 syllables in there, bleep. And that might be actually me going and playing, 3 notes really quick. Let me show you really fast. So this note right here, I can do a chord that's like a major chord. Wow. And it almost sounds like a bleep if I go, let's see. And it's bleep, bleep, and I don't know if that's actually how that word came around, but I'm going to make it up right now. And so, when you say the word bleep, you get these 3 syllables. You might actually be cycling through a full chord of music just within a couple milliseconds. That's how I like to think of it anyway. That's my little device. But because of these wacky workarounds like that, we get a really original sound that you're not going to find in music outside of chip music. Because why would I cycle through notes at like 64th note triplets to create a chord when I could just play a chord? Like, that's a really stupid way to make music, but it is awesome. But it's not something I would have thought to do on another instrument because it's a really ass-backwards way of doing it. But the tools that we write, you see how I was able to do that really quickly? People from the demo scene and stuff like that, they wrote tools to make music like this, and they thought of those things in mind where they could, make music. And so they make it very easy for me to do those exploits. But I'm going to move on, actually. I'm going to talk a little bit about chiptune culture. I don't know if this looks like anybody you know. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the reasons that people get into chiptunes. And I've been talking way too much. I'm going to bring things over to my friend Abducted by Sharks. And I want you to talk a little bit about how you got into chiptunes.
Okay. So when I was 15, I stumbled upon OC Remix, and I started remixing Super Mario songs because I was 15 and had a lot of free time. And then I joined a power metal band because all my friends were in it, and the only instrument they didn't have was a keyboardist. And I was like, I played piano from like 2nd through 7th grade. They're like, okay. And then I showed up with a keyboard the next week, and then after that, I moved away for college, and we tried to stay a band, but long distance doesn't really work out. So I started writing really, really crappy electronic music, and it kind of, for a really long time, my music always sounded like it belonged to video games, and I was trying to fight it. I was like, no, I want to be, I don't know, like an electronic producer that's playing clubs and stuff. And then I eventually was just like, you know what, I'm going to stop fighting myself. I'm going to write what I'm good at. And I started writing, then I started working at a job where I was writing music for video games. And I was like, this already sounds like a video game, and I have all these weird electronic things, and I combined it, so I started writing fake things. Yeah.
Might I say, the reason that your stuff sounded like old video game music is because it probably had a ton of melody to it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that chiptune stuff does really, really well. If you it's almost like saccharine sweet, where you just have tons of melody just flying at you. Like when I did that chord, that is a ton of notes that I'm playing. So when I play, that's way more notes than you hear in traditional music when I'm playing these 16th note arpeggios that go up 6 octaves. But that's what chiptune does really well, is it does melody really well. And so if you really like a ton of melody like I do when I was a kid, that's why I love Mega Man music, that's why I love
Hell yeah.
Mario stuff.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Testify. I think that I also, when I made shitty electronic music when I was 16, someone's like, that sounds like Mega Man. And I didn't think about it at the time, but the reason for that is because it had a ton of melody to it.
That's a really good observation.
I think about this stuff way too much. So nostalgia is definitely a huge reason why a lot of people get into chiptune, but there are other reasons why, and they're totally cool also. Some people just like the sound of it. I've met 17-year-olds who never grew up with a Game Boy or an NES or anything, and they love chiptune stuff, and I'm like, that's amazing. Nostalgia's playing zero part in what they like, but they love it. And also, there's this huge punk DIY ethic that goes with the chiptune scene. A lot of it is, taking our toys and making instruments out of it. And, we're not using prefabricated stuff. There's no presets or anything. And so, when I'm modifying my Game Boy, I'm literally getting out my soldering iron and modifying my own stuff and building my own tools and stuff like that. And it's super punk rock. In fact, the first time I met this guy, we were playing a show in a basement, and there's totally these scenes, these underground scene of people playing chiptune, and it's very akin to the punk rock scene.
Totally.
In fact, I have a quote that I'm going to go to, and I'm going to read it to you because it's kind of big, but It's a spectacular parade of wingnuts and geniuses, all coming from wildly different backgrounds, and bringing with them different insights and ideas. And the result, the whole community is constantly percolating with new input and new directions, and things never have a chance to become too structured or stale. In fact, it's probably the most driven DIY punk rock community I've ever seen, probably even more so than actual punk rock. It's constantly fun, strange, unexpected, challenging, genuine, and rewarding. And that's by a great artist I know named Pitch Shifter. He recently said that in an interview, and I was like, wow, that totally sums it up really well. And I'm going to get to some of that a little bit more, but there's such a diverse amount of stuff going on in the chiptune scene that, like, I could never even hope to begin to cover it here. Like, chiptune just spans so many different genres and stuff like that. In fact, I'm going to talk about that right now. What kind of music do you make on chiptunes?
I write cyberpunk, or to be more specific, it is dystopian future pop.
Soundtrack to Neuromancer?
Yeah, seriously. That's my new, my album comes out tomorrow. I'll plug it now. It's called Generic Dystopian City.
You know, I tend to make like this progressive metal butt rock that has tons of solos and weird time signatures and stuff like that. But there's like so many different things that people are doing. You know, people make chip hop, which is, you know, like rap music, or chip step. It pretty much, you just put the word chip in front of everything, like the letter I. And I'm actually going to show you just a couple different genres so you guys can hear like a huge variety of stuff that's out there. So this is some jazz, actually. All right, I'm going to transition right into death metal. We got funk music. Okay, so this is like technically blues because they follow blues like 12-bar blues, but this is crazy. There's also people doing like awesome vocal stuff around chiptune stuff. There's a lot of dance music coming out of the chiptune scene. There's some people making music that's supposed to sound like old NES music, like they just want to recreate that sound in particular. And then there's everyone's favorite dubstep. So I do want to point out, like, that dubstep sound, it sounds pretty legit. Like, if you heard that in a club, you'd be like, damn, that shit is fucking grungy if you're into that. But, like, that was made using 2 Game Boys, and what's cool about that is you can take these instruments are not like these little tinker toys. Like, these are these really robust instruments once you take them really far, and you can make this awesome, huge, full-sounding music, you know, that doesn't have to sound like, I don't know, like little chintzy, weak music. I don't know. But the point of that is, I don't know, like, I started to remix video game music. You know, used to make remixes of video game songs because the old NES songs that we love, they sound chintzy. Like, you're not going to go, like, blast it in your car. Well, some of you will, but you're not going to be like, yeah, fucking Mario World 2 Underworld. Mario World 2, that's like not even a game. But the thing about it is, especially when I found the Game Boy, I saw people making like straight up huge sounding dance tracks on it, and I was like, holy shit, like this has the sound aesthetic that I love, but it's got the hugeness, you know, that I did when I tried to remix songs and do it with traditional instruments like drums and guitar and, you know, make it sound big. So that's probably the big reason I think the Game Boy is very big in the scene nowadays, and that's why I use it in particular, because I was just looking for that really huge, like kick you in the pants sort of sound. But anyways, the big point is there's tons of different genres you can make with chiptunes, and they're all awesome. In fact, like any kind of music that you like, you can find chiptune of, unless you like really bad music.
There's that too.
Like
Bad
seriously, chiptunes, like anybody would fall in love with it if they heard the right track. And what's cool about that is we can all unite under the same banner and really get exposed to a huge variety of music. I actually played a show last night with a bunch of artists from San Jose, San Francisco, also from around here, and LA. And we played last night at this place called the Funhouse, but every act was very different. You know, there was a guy named Minus Baby that was making this awesome, like, generative, like, ambient sort of music, and then Crash Faster was doing this awesome, like, really smart pop music with vocals, and then we had people's names are totally escaping me. A-Rival making, like, dance music that wasn't, like, super chiptune, but it had, like, that influence to it, and it had a couple things in there, and it was kind of like dubstep meets Daft Punk. But all of these things, along with my, like, weird shred metal that I do, like, fit under the same show, and everyone kind of got together, and we got into all these different kinds of music, you know, under the same banner of chiptune. So, while there's a huge diversity, I love that myself. Like, I hate how one-dimensional a lot of genres of music have gotten. And so I enjoy hearing a ton of different stuff. So that's because I'm eclectic. The one thing I would say, though, is even though chiptune is not a genre, there are some kinds of music that I heard that I would not hear outside of chiptune. And so that maybe means that chiptune is a genre. I'm going to play this one track by this guy I know, Zeph, and like he does this really frantic melodic line that goes in a million directions, and you wouldn't hear anybody make that kind of sound like not on a chiptune instrument, because nothing else really lends itself to that sort of like crazy melodic sound. I'll play it for you. So, I don't know, that track in particular, like, you might find something that has a similar chord progression or a drum beat or something like that, but the actual, like, instrumentation and, like, the notes he's hitting, where he's going, you know, like, you're not going to hear that on a saxophone. And so, that, to me, that's cool that, you know, new music is being made. I actually got into an argument with somebody who was like, it's all been done, we all, you know, have just, every sort of musical progression and every note choice has been done, so we're all just retreading. And I was like, no, I actually know people only because they're using really stupid instruments with weird limitations. You know, they're making new music that I don't think people have made before, because no other instrument like cohesively lends itself to it. So chiptune might be a genre. That's my thing. So why would everybody make chiptunes? Why do you make chiptunes?
I want to be a unique flower. Yay.
Yes. And the other thing is, I played in a ton of bands and stuff. You played in a power metal band, and how annoying is it to like get everyone together for practice?
Oh my god, if you can't get a bunch of, it's so hard. The bigger the band, like in power metal, like we were a 5-person band. It's like, well, if one person can't make it, like that's the end of practice. Like we can't do it. Like if the drummer doesn't show up, you're like, well, do you want to like play the chords? Like it just doesn't work.
Right. So what was really attractive to me is when I was composing on the Game Boy and stuff like that, I could do everything myself. I could synthesize the drums, you know, the leads and everything, and I could write when I wanted to write. I didn't have to have a strict practice schedule or anything.
It was really nice too, just want to interject.
That when you're in a practice with a lot of people, you're on everyone's time. So when you're writing your own music by yourself, you can literally spend 80 hours on the first 30 seconds. Like no one's gonna be like, hey man, like move on. Like no one can tell you when it's done, which is super nice.
The other thing that's really cool about chiptune is if you're looking to get into music, it's a really inexpensive musical hobby. Like I have some advanced tools, but like I started off with my Game Boy that I found in my dresser from when I was 8, and you could buy a cheap Game Boy on eBay for maybe like $10. I've done it before. Or if you want, like this tracker that I'm using, it's called LSDJ. It's what a lot of guys use. It cost me $2, and I'm using a free emulator, and I'm making music, you know, essentially for free or for $2. There's another NES tracker called Family Tracker that's free. And like, if you're gonna go buy a digital audio workstation and interface and an instrument or a MIDI controller to like, or Ableton Live, you know, all those are like several $100s. And what it is that's kind of cost prohibitive unless you steal everything off the internet, which no one does apparently.
I got my old job to pay for it.
And in fact, what's cool is you see chiptune stuff popping up in a lot of like, not third world, but like not necessarily first world countries, like Singapore. Actually, I think Singapore is doing pretty well, but like there's a lot of countries where, you know, maybe they don't have the best musical instruments or something. Actually, you know what it is the cost of importation is really high in those countries, and so it costs so much more to get into music in a lot of foreign countries. So you'll see chiptune popping up in a lot of places because they can either make music on their, you know, little laptop for free, or they can pick up an old Game Boy and download some software, and it's really cheap and awesome. So for like, I think $100, I was playing shows and had like a pretty awesome setup already. I ended up upgrading it after that, but that was, you know, just because I wanted to pimp my ride. But you can totally get started, and it's really inexpensive, and that's one of the coolest things. And the other thing is it's super portable. I could literally show up to a show with a fanny pack with my Game Boy in it if I really wanted to. You know, I also bring my guitar and other stuff, but a lot of guys just play with a Game Boy, and I'll go and take the Megabus, which I don't know if you guys have.
We have both bus with you.
Oh, okay.
But I guess you guys are all from everywhere, so.
Yes. So,
Do you actually have a fanny pack?
I don't not have a fanny pack.